Alright guys, so in this video I wanted to start talking about the hypodermis. Now the hypodermis is a layer beneath your epidermis and dermis. So if your epidermis was here, let's draw a simple diagram. Not too detailed. So here, this is your epidermis. And I'll just draw this little part to represent your epidermis. And then I'll draw the dermis, which is below the epidermis. Then your hypodermis would be below these two layers. Okay. All right. So, by the way, it's worth noting that the thickness of each of these layers in this diagram is not accurate. So, this diagram is just being used right now to represent the order or the position of each layer relative to the other layers. It's basically saying that the epidermis is at the top, the dermis is in the middle, and the hypodermis is at the bottom. The relative thickness of each of these layers is not being accurately depicted in this diagram. But anyways, this hypodermis is going to be below the epidermis and dermis. Now, it's worth noting that the hypodermis is actually not part of the skin. It's not technically considered part of the skin. The epidermis and dermis are considered part of the skin, but the hypodermis is not. So let's get into what actually makes up the hypodermis. So we'll say we just took a little segment of skin, and this is your hypodermis, and then above it would be your dermis. So this right here is a part of your dermis. It's sort of cut off the screen, but this is a part of your dermis. And then this right over here would be your hypodermis. Okay. Now, what is going to make up your hypodermis? Well, first, we'll talk about adipose tissue. So I'll write it out here. Adipose tissue. And another word for adipose tissue is just fat. So adipose tissue is the fat. Is also known as fat. So what is adipose tissue exactly? What makes up fat or adipose tissue? Well, adipose tissue is actually just a bunch of adipocytes. So each one of these is an adipocyte. Okay. Alright, what are these adipocytes going to do? Well, they're actually going to be a form of energy storage. So they're going to store energy that you have in your body. What else does this adipose tissue do for you other than energy storage? Well, it also acts as, it absorbs shock, and it also acts as an insulator. So you can imagine these would both be useful. So absorbing shock would be important if you were ever subject to some form of force. And an insulator is useful for varying temperatures that your body might not do well in. Okay. What else comprises your hypodermis? Well, we actually have connective tissue in your hypodermis. And the way that works is this adipose tissue here is going to be in little lobules. So I'll draw maybe one of these lobules. This is not an accurate number of cells, but I'll just draw that to represent a lobule. And then there would be connective tissue between every single lobule. So then there would be like another lobule over here. You can imagine. And then there would be more connective tissue, and there would be lobules all throughout the hypodermis, lobules of adipose tissue. Now, what is this connective tissue made of? So we'll draw an arrow and say connective tissue. What is this connective tissue made of? Well, I've talked about this before, but it's going to be made of, it's going to have fibroblasts, and these fibroblasts are going to produce the components of the connective tissue. They're going to help produce the components of the connective tissue. Yeah. What else is going to be in your hypodermis? Well, you're also going to have blood vessels. These blood vessels are going to deliver oxygen to the cells in your hypodermis. So I'll just draw this to represent a blood vessel. It would probably be more detailed than this, but this is just pretty much just a simple way to show a blood vessel. And then there's some oxygen. So there are going to be blood vessels in your hypodermis. So that pretty much concludes this first video on the hypodermis. I'll continue in the next video. Thank you.